गुड आफ्टरनून। माइनॉरिटी कंसर्न की तमाम टीम की जानब से हम आज अपने तमाम नाजरीन और अपने तमाम मेहमानों को प्रोग्राम में खुशामदीद कहते हैं। माइनॉरिटी कंसर्न एक डिजिटल मैगजीन है जो पाकिस्तान में अक़लियती इशूज़ पर खबरें शाया करता है। इसके अलावा हम मुख्तलिफ मौज़ूआत पर वीकली वेबिनार्स भी मुनक्किद करते हैं। हमारी आज की गुफ्तगू का मौजू है यूके रवांडा प्लान फॉर असाइलम सीकर्स। आज के मौजू पर इजहार ख्याल करने के लिए हमारे साथ एक भरपूर पैनल मौजूद है जो अपने अपने हवालों से यूके में असाइलम सिस्टम, रेफ्यूजी इशूज और इंसानी हकूक के अमल में मसरूफ है। आप सब अपने अपने फील्ड में जाने पहचाने नाम हैं। हमारे साथ सियासतदान, वकला हजरात और मजहबी रहनुमा भी मौजूद हैं। आज के मौजू को वो हमारी मदद करेंगे ताकि हम बेहतर तौर पर उसे समझ सकें। आप सब ने हमें लंदन से ज्वाइन किया है। हमारे साथ मौजूद हैं डॉक्टर नौशाबा खिलजी, काउंसलर मॉरिस जॉन्स, अब्दुल वदूद खान एडवोकेट, रेवरेंड फादर यूनस फ्रांसिस, और शायद हमें थोड़ी देर में आमिर एजाज सिंधु साहब भी ज्वाइन कर लें, जिन्होंने मुझे इत्तला दिया कि शायद उनकी तबीयत खराब है। हम आप सबके बहुत शुक्रगुजार हैं कि आपने हमारी दावत पर आज के प्रोग्राम के लिए वक्त निकाला। इसके अलावा आज के प्रोग्राम के लिए हमें साइमन मिचेल ने खुसूसी पैगाम भेजा है। आप जॉइंट पब्लिक इशू टीम के टीम लीडर हैं और ये JPIT जो है वो 3 मुख्तलिफ जो चर्चेज है उनका मुश्तरका इदारा है जो जस्टिस एंड पीस इश्यूज पर काम करता है। और रवांडा पर सिमियन और उनके अदारे ने अवेयरनेस और एडवोकेसी का काम काफ़ी किया है। हम उनके शुक्रगुजार हैं कि उन्होंने हमें एक पैगाम सॉलिडारिटी के लिए आज भेजा है। आज का प्रोग्राम माइनॉरिटी कंसर्न के फेसबुक पेज पर लाइव चलेगा और बहुत से नाज़रीन उसे बराह रास्त देख सकते हैं। इसके अलावा प्रोग्राम की रिकॉर्डिंग कल हम अपने YouTube चैनल पर भी लगाएंगे ताकि बाकी ज़्यादा लोग देख सकें। आज के प्रोग्राम की निज़ामत हमारे नौजवान साथी क्रिस गिल करेंगे जिन्होंने हमें लंदन से ज्वाइन किया है। क्रिस लंदन में साइबर सिक्योरिटी कंसल्टेंट है जिनका फोकस गवर्नेंस, रिस्क रिस्क मैनेजमेंट और कंप्लायंस है। इसके अलावा आप ISO 2007-1 के साथ भी मुंसलिक हैं और आप दुनिया भर में अपने क्लाइंट्स को इसके जरिए सर्विस फराहम करते हैं। आपने सिटी यूनिवर्सिटी ऑफ लंदन से इंटरनेशनल इकोनॉमिक्स और बिजनेस में MSc की डिग्री हासिल की। क्रिस गिल हैज मल्टीपल qualifications and certifications in cybersecurity. He worked in financial services for a number of years. Now I will request to Chris to run the program. Over to you, Chris.
Thank you very much, Aftab Saab, for starting the program and that introduction. And from myself, a very warm welcome and the Minority Concern team. Today's webinar title is the UK's Rwanda Plan for Asylum Seekers. And I'd like to start by thanking Aftab Sahib for arranging this webinar. We do have a very distinguished panel of guests joining us today who will be able to give insights into today's topic. Those are Dr. Noshaba Khiljee, who is a family friend and someone my family has known for many years. So brilliant to have you joining us. Advocate Abdul Wadood Khan, Councillor Maurice John, and Rev Younis Francis. At this point, I'd like you all to introduce yourselves, and I'd like to start by asking Dr. Noshaba Khiljee, please.
Thank you, Chris, for this wonderful opportunity, and Mr. Aftab for inviting me. So my name's Noshaba Khiljee, as Chris mentioned. I'm actually a medical consultant. I'm a renal specialist, not so much of a politician, but I have been I'm still a candidate, a Conservative Party candidate, and I have fought in the 2019 general election.
Wonderful. Thank you for that, Noshaba. Advocate Abdul Wadood Khan, would you please introduce yourself?
Hello, everyone. Yes, I am Abdul Wadood Khan. I'm sole director of Rights Law Solicitors. I practice mainly in immigration in addition to other areas of law. And today's topic is particularly very much related to the immigration and immigrants. So I really adore your effort to take this issue and kind of create an awareness among the people at large, so people know what the issue is and how to deal with it and what possibly everyone can do. So I really appreciate this effort and thank you for inviting me.
Marvellous. Councillor Maurice John, sir, would you please introduce yourself?
Yes, thank you, Chris. My name is Maurice Johns. I work in the All Parties Parliamentary Group for Pakistani Minorities in the British Parliament, as well as I'm the chairman of the Board of Trustees of the Bedfordshire Refugees and Asylum Seekers Board. Thank you.
Thank you very much. And last but not least, Reverend Younis Francis, would you please introduce yourself?
Yeah, thank you, Chris, and thank you, Aftab, for inviting me. I'm based in London, South Croydon, and I'm a parish priest or rector at St. John's Church as Selston in the Diocese of Southwark, and I've been here for 3 years in this parish, and I'm an Anglican priest.
Thank you. Right, introductions are done. We're all settled in, ready to address the topic. I'd like a little bit more preamble from myself. Thank you for the introductions. And on behalf of Minority Concern, we extend our gratitude for you all taking time out of your busy schedules to contribute to today's discussion. Before we dive in, I'm going to just provide a little bit of scene setting and context. Successive governments have found it difficult to find the answers to the UK's migration quandary. There are many perspectives, and over the decades, needs and requirements have changed. Perspectives include the need for immigration and migration due to a skills shortage and an aging population. On the other hand, there are those who would argue that immigration is stretching our public services to breaking point and has been depressing wages for decades. These are just a few points I put out there. Obviously, the conversation's much larger, but just to get the ball rolling, that's what I'd like to add. What we do know is the number of people arriving in the UK in small boats has increased exponentially in recent years, which has led to the controversial Rwanda plan. So at a very high level, and you guys are much better placed to discuss it, I'm just going to give a high-level overview of what the Rwanda asylum plan is. It's a 5-year agreement. Some asylum seekers arriving in the UK would be sent to Rwanda to have their claims processed over there. If successful, they could be granted refugee status and allowed to stay. If not, they could apply to settle in Rwanda on other grounds or seek asylum in another safe third country. No asylum seeker would be able to apply to return to the UK. Today, our panel of experts in their field, we've got politicians, we've got people from the Church of England, we've got legal representatives, so a diverse lens we should gain today. So without any further ado, let's get started with the first question. And my first question is for Dr. Noshaba Khiljee, please. And to get us started, would you like to give us an insight into the Rwanda plan and what it entails, please?
Sure, Christopher. So the why the Rwanda plan, and I would like to sort of distinguish between what the Rwanda plan and the Rwanda bill is. So to give you a little bit of a context, back in 2020, we were getting less than 8,000 people who were crossing our English Channel. This number had exponentially increased in 2021, where we had around 28,000 people crossing the Channel, and the highest it peaked in 2022 where around 45,000 to 46,000 people had crossed the channel. Now, obviously, as you can see, the numbers had gone up by hundreds of percentage. And the latest figures that I have from March 2024, at the moment, 4,644 people have crossed our channel. So back in April of 2022, the then Prime Minister Boris Johnson designed a policy or something where we can deter the asylum seekers from making a dangerous journey of which is about 20 miles, which is not very much, but to cross the channel across from Europe in small boats or inflatable dinghies to the English shores. So basically, when the Rwanda plan came about, it was mainly a deterrent to try and stop people coming across under these dangerous migration routes. And not only preventing us, in some cases, of course, we have genuine asylum seekers, but I think a lot of people were coming across because there is a myth that is easier to find jobs. We have a good benefit system. So if people come here, of course, our country is going to be giving them provisions, and hence a lot of people are coming across. So I think this is just sort of a bit of a background or as to why the Rwanda bill was set up. So what I'm going to do is, alongside you, I've given you the numbers as to why this was set up. I'd like to sort of look at the other speakers, what they have to say, and then perhaps we can have a discussion regarding this.
Thank you. Thanks for setting the scene as well. I'd like to ask Abdul Wadood Khan, why should the Rwanda plan be scrapped?
Thank you. This is a very good question. Yes, if we say that this is not the way asylum seekers should be dealt with, then there must be some reasons, good reasons to say that. Obviously, if government is taking some initiative, taking some steps, as my friend Dr. Noshaba said, it is a deterrent, then why that deterrent shouldn't be used? There should be some good reasons. But I think we need to understand the plight of people who make this decision to take this kind of dangerous journeys and try to come to UK, and what are their expectations. That is one side. But on the other side, what are our traditions, norms, and rules which we are obliged by? What are the English laws? What are the English international laws? What are the human rights laws across the world? Are we really working within those framework, or we are just adopting a strategy which only creates a deterrence, but we are completely out of bounds of those legislations or those human rights rules? For example, let's say when this first flight was attempted, then a court case started, and that case went all the way up to Supreme Court. And Supreme Court rightly decided that this plan is illegal. So obviously, government has all the opportunity to put government's side of story of deterrence, and the advocates against it put their side of argument, and very rightly, Supreme Court decided that this is illegal. But for some reason, government is not really willing to accept the authority of Supreme Court. I'm sorry to say this. Because now what government is trying to do is to introduce a bill which will say that Rwanda is a safe country. So it will be declared in law that doesn't matter what Rwanda does on the ground, but UK law will say Rwanda is a safe country. So even there are hundreds and thousands of killings and miscarriages of justices, but the UK law will continue saying that it is a safe country. So it is justified to send people there. So government is trying to change the facts by making law, which is contrary to the all rules of natural justice. Right? That is one of the reasons that we should, I'll say, put our forces together to stop it. No one can change the facts by making law. Law can only regulate the society, establish a kind of mechanism to deal with the situations, but cannot establish the facts, cannot change the facts, cannot change the reality. Rwanda is a country which has a long history of human rights abuses, which has a history of genocide, and it's simply because it fits with our proposal, then we declare it safe and we do it, make it a part of the legislation that it is safe country. That is not fair. That is, I'll say, one of the biggest reasons. And secondly, already the human rights laws which we have enforced in UK, it is completely contrary to those laws. And the biggest authority on that is the Supreme Court's decision, because all those laws, Human Rights Act 1998, European regulations, international human rights, all those things were looked at, and still Supreme Court decided that the Rwanda plan is against the law. So it is contrary to the human rights norms across the world.
Thank you, sir.
Yeah.
Thank you for the perspective and giving us the legal background. We're going to come back with a question which links shortly. So I'd like to just take a pause there and at this point bring in Councillor Maurice John. And for the fullness of the conversation, get his perspective on what the Rwanda asylum plan is and how it will affect asylum seekers. Over to you, sir.
Thank you. Just to clarify that I'm also the chairman of the Bedfordshire Council Refugees and Asylum Seekers Board. So we deal with lots of cases of asylum seekers and refugees. Coming from a small town outside London, perhaps you look at things differently. But in a small town like Bedford, you have to consider the local people as well as the asylum seekers and refugees. Although our sympathies are with them, but considering the local people, how people settle here, how the relationship develops with them, and all these issues have to be thought of. The government didn't just think one day, got up and say, we are going to introduce Rwanda as an option. There was consistent pressure from the local people, and there has been still a majority of local people. So obviously the government has to pay attention to what they say. And also the locals have to consider how many people can be assimilated successfully in the country. Other thing I would like to say, Rwanda is not an isolated country. Most of the countries at the moment have kind of arrangements with the African countries, like Greece and the European countries had since 2015 an agreement with Turkey, where the asylum seekers were sent to Turkey to be dealt with there. Then there has been an agreement between Italy and Albania recently, where the asylum seekers will be sent to Albania for their claims to be considered. Similarly, there's been agreement with Tunisia, and very recently an agreement has been signed with Egypt as well. So these cases will keep on. And as far as Rwanda is concerned, UK is not in isolation. Denmark had an MOU with Rwanda. Israel had an agreement with Rwanda as well. And I can see more countries signing agreements like that with not only Rwanda, but Mediterranean, North African countries as well. So all these things we have to consider as well. And although we sympathize with the asylum seeker and refugees, but you have to look at the other side of the picture as well.
Thank you. Thank you for that perspective. I think it followed on very nicely from our last piece. So we've got both sides of the argument, and it places us very nicely for me to ask Rev Younis, what is the Rwanda plan? And from the church's perspective, how do they see what's their stance and what's their position?
I think the church has been actually very vocal and has raised its concerns very strongly in every platform wherever possible, including the House of Lords and the Parliament, and of course in the wider society as well, because Christianity has always supported the persecuted, the vulnerable, the marginalized, and the homeless people, or anyone who does go through difficult times in their lives. So there is always an approach of compassion and welcome from the church's perspective. And this comes from a very theological perspective, and it's a biblical perspective as well, because we can find the basis of immigration even in the biblical times, in the whole history of the Bible, the Old Testament. There's so many examples of people fleeing and leaving their country, and the biggest example obviously is the people from moving slavery in Egypt to the freedom land, as we say. And of course, in the New Testament, Jesus' own example of fleeing from Herod, when he was told, sort of Joseph was told through an angel that Herod wants to kill the baby. And of course, we have an example where Joseph, Mary, and Jesus had to flee to Egypt. And even when they come back, they're displaced because they cannot go back to Bethlehem, and they had to go to a different area because Herod's son was ruling there. So there is a long history and tradition from the church's perspective, and to look after those who are displaced, those who are marginalized, those who are persecuted, fleeing their homeland, or other areas of life. Of course, it's a wider subject where it's not just one sphere where people flee from persecution. There is political persecution sometimes, and there is religious, of course, persecution. There is a social sort of discrimination, and there's so many other areas where, because of sex and race as well, nowadays quite strong as well, where people have to flee. So the church has always been very supportive of those people, to help and support them. And the bishops in the House of Lords have been very, very vocal. And in fact, there was a letter by the 26 bishops who are members of the House of Lords, and they wrote in the Times stating their position and saying, actually, this policy actually shames not just the church, but it shames the UK, actually, as it was mentioned earlier as well. There has been a history and tradition of welcoming people from everywhere, wherever they are persecuted and they're fleeing for their life. And it's not only a church's perspective, it goes against actually UK's sort of welcoming approach in the past. So the church's sort of concern is based on compassion and fairness and justice. And apart from the Church of England, also there have been other church organizations or Christian organizations. They have raised their concern as well. And there's JPIT, which is sort of an organization there, and there were members, sort of 1,450 church leaders, and they expressed their concerns, saying this policy shows actually lack of compassion and respect for people's human rights and dignity. And unfortunately, some of the sort of ministers actually criticized the bishops and the church's approach of defending these people, and they said actually church and some churches actually support the sort of the cases that are not genuine. And Bishop of Chelmsford, I think she responded by saying, of course, the churches support those who come into their care and whatever way possible, but it is not the responsibility of the church to decide whether the cases are genuine or not. It is the Home Office sort of a responsibility to sort of decide whether the case is genuine. Or our responsibility is to care for the vulnerable and those who are running for their life.
Thank you, Reverend. At this stage, I'd just like to pause and recap. I think we've had a cross-section of opinions and perspectives, all have their own merits, and that's what we're here for today. What we have identified is immigration, migration is certainly a problem. The solution to that is debatable. We know it's election year as well, and immigration is one of the topics which is always hotly debated, whether it's not election year, but it could be front and center in the next few months, as it has been for quite some time. It was great to get the legal perspective from Sir Abdul Wadood. It was brilliant to get the political perspective from Dr. Noshaba and Maurice John. So now we move into the next stage of the conversation, and to take it forward, I'd like to come back to Dr. Noshaba and ask her, what actions can civil society take and faith groups take to address the issue?
Thanks, Christopher, and thank you to everyone. I think it's been quite a broad range in terms of legal aspects, the church's aspect, and a political aspect. I think the biggest thing I would say at this moment in time, why the Rwanda plane came and why it's so controversial, I think we also have to take a step back, because these people that are coming, that are crossing the channels, are actually leaving a safe haven. So they're coming from, majority of the time, from another safe country like France. Okay, so when people are coming already leaving a safe haven like France, if they were coming from even places like North Africa, if we happen to be closer to North Africa, you could see the consensus as to why people are doing that. The problem is we're also a very small island, and yes, we do need people to come and come to a safe haven if they are genuine. Okay, over the last 3 or 4 years, you can see the numbers have grown exponentially, and on top of that, around 71 people have also died crossing the channel through these illegal means. Not only that, it's become a booming businesses for the people, the people smugglers who are allowing these things to happen. So it's a very tenuous question that you've asked, but as a society and as a nation, I don't think, and we are a nation that is based on Christian values. We have never been in a position where we can say, well, everyone can come to us. I know that we have good national services, we have human rights, good human rights that are law in this country. But as a small nation, I don't think that we can allow everyone to come. And how do we know people are genuine? In fact, majority of the people that come across, they're not families, they're actually young single men that come across. So again, in terms of seeing every perspective, I don't think the country or the government has ever disputed that people who come in genuinely looking for a refugee status should not be granted a refugee status. But as we all very well know, that a lot of people come across who are not genuine people. So surely we should have a place where we can vet out people who are genuine and who are not. You see, already in this country, we are spending over £8 million housing people who have currently applied for asylum in the country. Now, as a nation, we know that we have our own needs. We have to put money into NHS. We have to put money into other services. How are we able to help ourselves if we don't have enough funds? So I guess the issue is a very difficult issue. And again, I emphasize the point, the government has never said we shouldn't allow refugees. The big issue is, how do we know that they are genuine refugees?
Thank you, Dr. Noshaba. For that perspective, as you've touched on the point, numbers have been going up, and please, anyone on the panel, correct me if I'm wrong, but I believe in terms of net migration and immigration, where we've been looking for professional individuals to take up jobs within our society, numbers are actually increasing under the current government, which some would say demonstrates the need for us to have individuals in the country, the right individuals. Many say migrants are the backbone of the NHS, for example. On the other side of the coin, there's the argument that we need to show compassion, which Younis Francis demonstrated, and they may not add value to our country, but historically it's been a key value to open our doors to individuals like that. Another perspective would be immigration, which is not required, which at times some people say leads to terrorism, or they've left countries where they do not need to come here. But on that, I'd still be personally very careful in judging that and going through the vetting system and the legal system and the Home Office to find out where they stood on that. So a lot of different lenses to the conversation, a lot of insights we've had already, which have been most valuable. And I'd like to come back to Abdul Wadood Khan, advocate, please, and get his perspective on what strategy should civil society take to address the issue, which is so complicated. Over to you, sir.
Thank you. Right. Before convince the civil society to support the idea to scrap it, I think it's important that we, in a way, respond to the concerns of the civil society, some of which were kind of mentioned here. For example, we don't know whether they are genuine refugees. That's fair enough. But unless you deal with their case, you ask what is the problem, or you would know it, then yes, let them come and ask them. Deal with their case and you will know whether they're genuine or not. No one is here to support the illegal immigration, illegal in the sense that who are not genuine, to grant them a refugee status. No one is for that. But we at the same time know there are hundreds, let's say majority of people who come, they are genuine. There will be a fraction of those people who are not genuine. So at the cost of those few people, you punish everyone else. That is simply not fair. And secondly, one of the arguments was that all of those people who are coming, they are young, they are not families. Right. You need to look at their claims, what they're saying. They are saying, I have this problem, that's why I fled. They're not saying that my family has a problem. So anyone who has a problem, he will fled. So most of the time, there will be scenarios when you don't have the opportunity to collect your whole family and collect your whole belongings, and you just have to protect yourself and run away. So this expectation that you don't have a family or you are a single young man, then you don't have a problem, that can be one's perception, but it's definitely not the reality in every case. And again, there was an argument that the people who are coming here, they are coming from safe countries. But there is already law which is in place that if someone comes to UK and claims asylum and who has passed through a safe country, then that person will be sent back to the first safe country where he came from. For example, if someone came from France and France is a safe country, so as per international law and UK laws, that person can be sent back to France. So it's that simple. So if they are coming from some safe country, so send them back to that safe country. not to unsafe country, which is Rwanda, and just declaring it that it is a safe country by force. I'm saying by force because Parliament is trying to legislate to declare it safe, whether it is safe or not. Because once it becomes a part of statute, then all courts and all judiciary, everyone will be bound to consider it safe. Doesn't matter what happens on the ground. So in fact, legislation will change the facts, which is not justified in any way. Right. My suggestion would be that everyone who really agrees with me, they should try their best. And that can be to contacting their local representatives, their political leaders, raising their concern that this is not fair, this is not justified, because that is one of the channels which really take your voice to the Houses of Parliament and to the people who make these kind of decisions. So that can be one way. Then other can be people can write direct to the Home Secretary. People can write direct to the Prime Minister saying this is not fair. Even people can write to the King saying you are a king of this land and you are the person responsible to provide protection who come here, and you are going to sign a law which will be completely unfair. So please don't do it. So make some alliances, make some pressure groups, and bring some legal challenges to this kind of scenarios wherever it arises. And that is a good deterrence. And also create awareness among the public that this is what is about to happen. Because yes, minority communities or maybe the people who are refugees at this stage, they will be aware of this, what is forthcoming. The people who have no kind of immigration issue, they may not even be aware of it. And to make them aware and get their support, it is very important to create awareness. And I think this is one of the good programs in that effort. So I appreciate that. So yes, to create awareness among the public and among the people in authority and making them aware and make them realize that this is not what the UK stands for. And this is not what fits within the laws which are already enforced in the UK and across the world. And the examples of other countries that someone else have the agreement with someone, we don't know the full extent of that. And we don't know what those agreements are. As I said, even UK have a law which says that if someone comes from the safe country, you can send him back to that safe country to go and seek asylum there. So my suggestion would be to particularly, this is going to be election year, choose your representative, vote for the person who knows this and who supports this idea. And if they don't, just make them aware that this is our concern, make sure you represent us. So if there will be that kind of political pressure, then obviously it's likely the government will listen and stop this plan.
Thank you.
Okay.
Thank you for that, sir. Really good insight from a legal perspective and also from a civil society perspective. Some really pertinent points. And I think why this topic is so challenging, because we could have examples of immigrants who have given and contributed so much to this country in academia, in sport, in other walks of life. On the other side of the coin, we could point our fingers at immigrants who have been a detriment to this country. So it swings in roundabouts, and it is election year, and there is a lot of noise, and there's going to be the narratives will be getting stronger week on week, month by month, which makes it more difficult for the average person to take a position. And what you've rightly mentioned is having smaller conversations and through channels such as this or in your local area political groups, you can gain insights into the cross-party perspective and different perspectives and positions political parties hold before deciding on your vote. Obviously, there'll be other factors, but this could be a crucial one because people think about school places, people think about depleting parks and libraries and where money can go. On the other side of the coin, people will say these services won't be able to function without immigrants. So really interesting debate. Thank you for that. I'd like to get the
If I can say one thing more, if you don't mind.
Go ahead.
You know, this argument of money, that we don't have funds and resources and all those things, to me, this is also baseless. Let's say if we really want to use our resources, just stop sponsoring wars. If we stop sponsoring wars across the world and invest that money on the local population, we will be much better off. And there will be much less immigration and this refugee problem.
Thank you for that.
We are one of the big sponsors of the wars across the world.
Yeah.
And if we stop that and use that money, which we use for the weapons, and then we can reduce the influx of immigration as well, and we can use those resources for the betterment of the local society.
Thank you for that. And I think that may be a webinar in itself and a whole topic on itself. So certainly I can see that perspective. Just want to come back and stay focused, but thank you for that. And I'd like to come to Councillor Maurice John and now get his perspective on what actions civil society can take and how faith groups and society in general can help shape the immigration problem.
Thank you. One thing I would like to say, and I think the panelists will agree with me, it's very much a symbolic gesture by the government. There won't be that many people being sent to Rwanda, not that because the government doesn't want to send them, but simply because the capacity of the Rwandan authorities to deal with the refugees. So I read somewhere the figure of 1,000 people over a 5-year period. So that's about 200 people a year. And considering that we get maybe 20,000 people from the boats, that's only about 1 or 2% of those people. So that's one thing. I agree with the my eminent colleague on the panel, advocate, that is a point which the people will be making to their political leaders, their candidates, and raising their voice about it. And the message will go clearly to the parliament and it will be debated. It's a good thing we have such a healthy society and the parliament, which can debate these things in the parliament and decide there. So I agree that that should be the course of action to take, to raise the issue with your candidates and talk about it. And so the message does get through and is debated properly.
Thank you very much. Thanks for that. Now I'd like to come to Rev Younis. It was really insightful. You gave us the message of the church's position before and the openness. And as a country, the UK historically has been a safe haven for individuals who have been persecuted or needed a country to turn to. This does seem like we're pivoting quite sharply. At times, it may be that the legal system has stepped in, but I'd really like to get your point of view on why it's necessary for the UK government to have a more compassionate asylum policy, and should we be going back to a position we had previously? Over to you, Rev Younis.
Yeah, okay, thank you. First of all, I think as it's been mentioned that nobody supports the bogus claims, obviously. But I mean, UK's law and the whole system is built on Judeo Christian morality and the morality of care for those who are vulnerable. So it's not just a church's point of view, the whole history of UK's political history as well, and the judicial law and the whole system is actually based on love and care. And we have had examples, and even today we have examples, recent examples when, for example, and there seems to be a contradiction as well in a way. We are planning to send people to Rwanda. On the other hand, there were so many in the last few years brought in from Afghanistan and Syria, which were vulnerable people, and obviously they were facing life threats and all that. So on the one hand, we are happy to bring people whom we think are in danger of life, and on the other hand, those who managed to get here somehow, going through all the difficult challenges and life threats, and we want to send them to another country, which again is not safe. As mentioned, by saying a country is safe, cannot be safe. You can't say because this country is safe and government declares it safe, therefore it becomes safe. I think the UK government should continue what in the past has been a history and the tradition of care for those who are vulnerable and those who flee their lives. And we know for sure, there are communities around the world, they are persecuted because of their faith, because of their race, because of what they believe. And there's no doubt about that. There is social discrimination, there is cultural discrimination, there is religious discrimination, and there's political discrimination. We know that, and the UK government, excuse me, knows that of those certain communities. And obviously, I'm coming from Pakistan, and I think all of us do have that Pakistani heritage. We know what happens there to certain communities. And if they manage to come here, I've met people where at every sort of stage in their process, in their asylum claims, their Home Office doesn't even recognize that there are those challenges and those difficulties that people face. I've been to courts with people as a witness, and I know those cases were genuine. And and that's the challenge one has to face. It's not for us, as I said earlier, for the church to decide whether the case is genuine or not. Of course, we can hear those stories and we know the truth as well. But for us, we should continue to support those who are vulnerable, whatever their situations and circumstances, and those who are left or manage to leave their country for whatever reason. Of course, once they do manage to come here, they're not safe in the beginning either, because they don't have a home to live, they don't have a roof, they don't have a job, they might not have a much support system. So I think the churches and the government's initial response should be to care for them, and then see whether those cases are genuine or not, and then whatever the outcome is, then they decide accordingly, obviously.
Thank you. Really insightful again. I'd like to use this last stage of the programme to give all the panellists an opportunity to share their final thoughts. And the final question would be, Reverend Saab's touched on us having that Pakistani link and Pakistani Christians. Do you feel the Rwanda policy could affect Pakistani Christians, or where do we fit into this equation where we were already marginalised and struggling to get our claims processed? So final thoughts, and that would be the question. So over to you, Dr. Noshaba, please.
Thanks, Chris. I think a lot of important points have been raised within this discussion, and probably we don't have enough time to kind of pick and explore all the points that have been raised. And I think the last question, whether this will affect Pakistani Christians, again, I'm just going to come back on the research I've done regarding the small boat crossings. Majority of the people that are coming through or had been coming through were Albanians, Iranians, Afghanistanis, Syrians and Iraqis, and in fact Indians, which I incorporate, Pakistanis and the people from the subcontinent, were very, very small in comparison. So I think there's very, very few people that are coming across, say from Pakistan, who would be part of that. However, it's not just about the small crossings, it's about whether they will be affected. And of course, I think anyone who comes through illegal routes will be affected, but I still believe it's going to be a very, very small number in the end that will be affected. And I think what we need to do is I'm not saying that the Rwanda policy is the best policy, but we do need to look very carefully as to, again, coming through whether the genuine people are coming through. And some of the points that you mentioned, that yes, I work in the NHS as a doctor, and I know that over 50% of the people that work in the NHS themselves are from other countries. But I can reassure you that majority of them have come through proper channels. And the Rwanda policy is a deterrent. It's not a blanket policy for everyone who comes and applies for asylum. It's, if we need people to work in various industries which are backbone of this country, we have different policies out there to allow them to come in through legal channels. The bottom line is that we need a deterrent, and I will again come to this point that we need a deterrent where people who have been abusing the system, and I'm sure personally or through some channels we know that people have come to this country not necessarily being genuine asylum seekers. And again, I'm stating this from the government's point of view. If people are genuine, our country's always been welcoming. The bottom line is, when people are not genuine, how do we deter them? Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Noshaba. That was really good summary, and I agreed with a lot of it. Over to you, Advocate Abdul Wadood Khan, for your final thoughts and a question on how it may affect Pakistani Christians, please, sir.
Right. As Dr. Noshaba said, if we look on the statistics, there are not really that big number which we will see among the people who come through those channels which are being, in a way, deterred through this mechanism. So with that perspective, there will not really be much effect on Pakistani Christians, because if they are coming through other ways, so they will keep on coming and there will be no issue. But my question will be, or my statement will be, that it should be same for everyone. But I really know for a fact, yes, Christians in Pakistan are in minority and they are persecuted minority. Let's just take an example. If any Pakistani Christian comes through a boat and then he is caught at wherever, Dover or wherever, and because he came through that channel and that be removed to Rwanda and he got injustice, even if it is one single person, will that be justified? But there is a serious risk that it can happen simply because he come from that way and he then caught by this law. So no innocent person should be subject to injustice, including Pakistani Christians or wherever the people are from, whether they are from Iran, Afghanistan, Albania, or wherever. So as I said, I agree that people who are being persecuted, they should be offered compassion and help and support, whatever we can as a country.
Thank you, sir. And some really great points again. A brilliant summary. Councillor Morris John, over the floor is yours, sir.
Coming back to the Pakistani Christian minority, as we know, they are the most persecuted and most marginalized group in the country. And quite often, they don't have the facility or the ability to be able to travel to the West. The ironic thing is the most vulnerable and most marginalized people are not able to get out of the country. And my plea to the government of the UK will be to give people the right to claim asylum from the country where they are living, because simply they are not able to get out. These, ironically, are people who can afford to pay the fare, who can who are strong enough to get out. What about the females who are persecuted whole day and raped and marginalized? They're not able to travel to France. So those people are the most needy people. And they are never given justice like these people might be. So I think the Christians in Pakistan, they suffer a lot under blasphemy laws, under forced conversion and forced marriages of young minority girls, often underage. Where is the justice for those girls? This is nowhere near helping those people. So I think we have to think about those people who are most needy and most deserving.
Thank you very much. And again, we'd love to explore it due to time. Some great points you've just raised there. But thank you very much for that. And last but not least, Reverend Younis Francis, sir, would you give us your final thoughts?
Yeah, thank you, Chris. I know the government keeps on saying anyone who enters legally can sort of claim asylum and their case will be processed. But how many countries do have actually a proper legal way where people can, the persecuted people can actually go and apply? And we mentioned Pakistan. How many people from Pakistan actually can go to any of the UK embassy or any other European embassy, and where they can present themselves that their life is in danger, and that embassy will give them actually access visa and the means to fly from that country? I haven't heard of any, at least in my experience. Maybe there are others, but to my knowledge, I don't think there are any ways where those poor, persecuted, marginalized, running for their life can actually go to an embassy and apply, or the embassy will sort of give them protection in their own sort of areas and things like that. As we said, it is true not many people would be sent to Rwanda, and Maurice Jones mentioned that, and I read that document as well today. Probably it will be 1 or 2% of the people who might be, but it's more like creating a fear factor, I think, among people, which can be deterrent, and rightly so. I think for those people who use it as a means of smuggling people into country and this kind of dirty business of making money and exploiting other people, and perhaps it could be a good deterrent for them. But it also creates fear factor among other people when they say, if I come to the UK, probably many people won't know the details, but when we come to the UK, probably you will be sent to Rwanda. So that's kind of discouraging people, no? So maybe government might succeed in creating that kind of fear and deterrent factor in many people's minds. So my final thoughts would be, we as Christians and as country as well, keeping in with our tradition of caring for people, and especially the vulnerable and the deprived and the persecuted, should carry on doing that. And of course, dealing with the bogus claims, as we said earlier, of course, if somebody is abusing the system, then they should be dealt appropriately.
Thank you. Fully agree, and some really, really good points in there. One of the points you touched on was looking for the people who are, and it must be a big group or an international group, who create the boats and the whole network, stopping that at source. But I feel we could have needed another hour to carry on exploring this conversation, which would have been really good. Unfortunately, we've come to the end of today's program. Lots of really interesting perspectives, and in our final thoughts, I feel we're all very much aligned overall, whether it is the Rwanda plan, which is the correct way or not, having the right, knowing immigration is a problem, knowing we need immigration as well, very complicated and a minefield for the UK government to navigate through. But thank you for the legal perspective, the political perspective, the church perspective. It's been really insightful, and on behalf of minority concern, I'd like to thank you all for taking time out of your day. And I'd also like to take the opportunity once again to thank Aftab Saab, who's doing so much good work in the background to produce these shows. A lot of time and effort and energy goes into it. So thank you very much and hats off to you. And over to you to close the program, sir.
You're muted.
Sorry. Thank you reminding me. Thank you, Chris. Before we close the program, I'm going to run the message of Simeon Michell, and then we close the program. Thanks for your time and attention.
Here.
I think there is no voice.
Yeah, I think we've got a technical issue with the volume. Aftab Saab.
Yes. Is anything?
No, there's no volume to the video.
Okay. Sorry. Let me check it again. Oh, yes.
Hello everyone, my name is Simeon Michell and I'm the team leader.
Chris, can you hear it now? Good.
Yep.
Of the Joint Public Issues team of the Baptist, Methodist and United Reformed churches in the UK. I've known Aftab, worked with him over several years through the URC, and I'm really pleased that he's asked me to say a few words to your event today. Just to say a word about the Joint Public Issues team, or JPIT as we call it. We help our churches to work together for peace and justice through listening, learning, praying, speaking and acting on public policy issues. So we work on advocacy and bearing witness around a range of concerns of the churches, particularly in the UK context. One of our hopes for society is for a society that welcomes the stranger. And that takes us into issues around asylum and migration and refugees, and wanting to be guided by that hope that we would be a society that honours that biblical mandate to welcome the stranger. Now, as you are aware, notwithstanding some honourable exceptions, that principle doesn't seem to have been a guiding one for British governments for many years. In fact, a central aim of successive governments has been to curb so-called illegal migration, and especially the numbers of people that are crossing the English Channel to seek sanctuary in the UK. And over the last few years, this aim has been pursued with a toxic combination of harsh legislation and even harsher rhetoric. The Rwanda plan, the policy announced 2 years ago now, is a really clear example of that. An unprecedented agreement was made with the government of Rwanda, and the UK threatened to send anyone who entered the UK by crossing the English Channel, which it deemed an illegal route, and tried to claim asylum, to Rwanda instead. And it's not, as is often misunderstood, to be sent to Rwanda for offshore processing on behalf of the UK, but permanently to apply for asylum under the Rwandan system. And for all this, the Rwandan government has been paid a multi-million-pound sum, with more to come if the policy is ever actually enacted. Now, from the outset, our churches, through their leaders, have been vocal in statements said, People seeking asylum are not a problem to be dealt with, but are individuals with inherent value and dignity made in the image of God. Sending some of the most vulnerable people in the world thousands of miles away to be imprisoned does not respect this dignity. It's a distraction from the real work which needs to be done to establish workable, safe and welcoming routes through which the UK can play its part in responding to need. Now, of course, it wasn't only the churches that have opposed the Rwanda plan. It was criticised by many politicians, by the United Nations, and by lawyers who argued it would represent a breach of human rights commitments and the International Refugee Convention. A challenge was eventually brought to the policy in the courts, and it was ultimately upheld by the Supreme Court in the UK last November, which ruled that Rwanda could not be deemed a safe country to send people to. In response to this, the government introduced new legislation into Parliament, which seeks to say in law that Rwanda is safe, regardless of the findings of the courts or the facts on the ground. That's currently still going through Parliament. Even if it is passed, it's likely there will be further legal challenges, so it seems very unlikely that large numbers of people will be sent to Rwanda anytime soon, thank goodness. And what that means is it's not too late to raise your voice about this if you haven't done so already, and I would very much encourage you to do so. If you're in the UK and you want to contact your Member of Parliament, then going to our website, going to jpit.uk/Rwanda, you will find guidance on how to do that and a template letter that you can adapt. To conclude, I would say it's so important that we speak up for a fairer and a more compassionate asylum system. It's so desperately needed by those who are seeking safety in this country. And as we speak up, be encouraged that many faith leaders and many people across society are standing in solidarity about this. Thank you, and every blessing on your endeavours and on the rest of your meeting today.
आखिर में मैं अपने नाजरीन के लिए, क्योंकि ज़्यादातर हमारे नाजरीन जो हैं वो उर्दू स्पीकिंग है, और उनकी आसानी के लिए मैं दो तीन चीज़ें आपके साथ शेयर करना चाहता हूँ। एक तो ये कि जो लोग यहाँ पे इस मुल्क में आते हैं असाइलम लेने के लिए, वो ज़्यादातर वो होते हैं जो किसी न किसी शक्ल में परसिक्यूटेड होते हैं, जैसे कि पाकिस्तानी क्रिश्चियंस। और फिर ये भी एक बड़ा अजीब इत्तेफाक है कि यूके में तीन किस्म के 3 tier सिस्टम है असाइलम का। जैसे अफगानिस्तान और सीरिया से बाहर से लोग लाए जाते हैं, यूक्रेन से, लेकिन जो यहाँ पे हैं उनको बाहर भेजने की कोशिश की जाती है। तीसरा ये भी कहा जाता है कि यूके में वर्कर्स की शॉर्टेज है, लेकिन जब लोग यहाँ पे आते हैं तो उनको कबूल नहीं किया जाता। और एक स्टडी के मुताबिक अगर जो असाइलम लेने वाले लोग हैं उनको यहाँ पे काम करने का हक दिया जाए तो मुल्क की इकोनॉमी को बहुत फायदा होगा। ये भी बड़ा इंटरेस्टिंग है कि जब हुकूमत ये बिल ला रही थी तो उसी वक्त होम ऑफिस ने 2 रवांडियन असाइलम सीकर्स को उनको कबूल किया था एज अ रेफ्यूजी, इसलिए कि उन्हें लगता था कि रवांडा जो है वो एक सेफ कंट्री नहीं है। यूके पार्लियामेंट की जॉइंट कमेटी ऑन ह्यूमन राइट्स जो है उसने 22 फरवरी को ये ऐलान किया है कि वो अपना एक वफद रवांडा भेजेंगे ताकि वहां पे ह्यूमन राइट्स की जो सिचुएशन है उसको जाना जाए। माइनॉरिटी कंसर्न समझता है कि रवांडा प्लान अगेंस्ट है EU कन्वेंशन ऑन ह्यूमन राइट्स, द जिनेवा कन्वेंशन 1951, the proud history of hospitality and the democratic values of the British nation, the principles of international human rights treaties, and the human and Christian traditions of compassion. हम हुकूमत से मुतालबा करते हैं कि बजाय लोगों को रवांडा जैसे मुल्क में भेजा जाए, हुकूमत वक्त यूके गवर्नमेंट यूरोपियन यूनियन के साथ ज्यादा कोलैबोरेट करे ताकि एक जस्ट امیگریشن سسٹم اس ملک میں نافذ کیا جائے. مجھے آخر میں شکریہ ادا کرنا ہے اپنے تمام ساتھیوں کا جنہوں نے آج کے پروگرام کے لیے وقت نکالا، جن میں محترمہ ڈاکٹر نوشابہ خلجی صاحبہ، کونسلر مورس جان صاحب، عبدل ودود خان ایڈوکیٹ صاحب، اور ریورنڈ فادر یونس فرانسس صاحب. ہمیں افسوس ہے کہ اپنی طبیعت کی ناسازی کے باعث جناب عامر اعجاز ہندو ایڈوکیٹ صاحب ہمیں جوائن نہیں کر سکے. مجھے یقین ہے کہ وہ اگلے کسی پروگرام میں ہمارے ساتھ ہوں گے. مجھے شکریہ ادا کرنا ہے آج اپنے تمام ناظرین کا جو آخر تک ہمارے ساتھ جڑے رہے، اور آخر میں مجھے بہت زیادہ شکریہ ادا کرنا ہے اپنے ساتھی کرس گل کا، جنہوں نے انتہائی خوبصورتی سے پروگرام کو چلایا. آخر میں جاتے جاتے میں آپ سے یہی گزارش کرنا چاہتا ہوں کہ اپنے ارد گرد رہنے والے تمام انسانوں کا خیال رکھیے. شاید آپ کا ایک چھوٹا سا عمل بہت سے انسانوں کی زندگی میں روشنی بھر دے. خداوند آپ سب کا حامی و ناصر.